Imagine standing beneath 250-metre tall ancient stone columns that look like giant organ pipes dropping straight into the Southern Ocean. Today we're setting sail from Port Arthur on the Cape Raoul Wilderness Cruise, exploring sea caves, spotting seal colonies, and getting up close with some of the most dramatic coastal wilderness in southern Tasmania. And also answering the question, is this 90-minute cruise actually worth adding to your Tasmania itinerary? Let's find out. Starting at Port Arthur Historic Site, the Cape Raoul Cruise goes past Point Pure and the Isle of the Dead, before heading past Safety Cove and Crescent Bay, before finally making its way out onto the Southern Ocean and to Cape Raoul. The cruise is run by Pennicott Wilderness Journeys. We've been on a few of their cruises over the years, including their Tasman Island cruise. I'll link to that video in the description box below. One of my favourite things about doing these cruises, regardless of what part of the state we're in, is seeing the different sedimentary lines and rock formations that make up our coast. As we came around the point, we started seeing sea caves. These have been caused by thousands upon thousands of years of erosion from both the wind and the waves. Whilst these sea caves are quite small, there is definitely bigger examples of sea caves on the Tasman Peninsula, one being the Remarkable Caves, another being the Tasman Arch. Now, as you can see, we had some pretty spectacular weather for the day that we went on this cruise. The waters around the Tasman Peninsula are notorious for being quite rough, but today we get to see it somewhat calm, and it is also a magnificent shade of blue. The tour happens twice a day at 10:45 and 1:15 every day except Christmas Day, or if the weather is significantly bad. It is recommended to be at the jetty at least 15 minutes beforehand as well. I highly recommend purchasing your tickets in advance as the tour is becoming increasingly popular. As I mentioned earlier, the Cape Raoul Cruise leaves from Port Arthur Historic Site, so pricing does include entry to the site. When you arrive at the historic site, go to the ticketing desk and they'll be able to help you out. The cost of the cruise and entry to Port Arthur Historic Site is $190 for adults and $140 for children aged between 3 and 16. Under 3s are free. There's also an option to get the bus to and from Hobart with enough time on the peninsula to enjoy the tour and some time around Port Arthur Historic Site. This option costs $260 for adults and $210 for children between the ages of 3 and 16. For more information, I highly recommend visiting the Pennicott Journeys website, which I'll link in the description box below. The boat we're on has space for 2 wheelchairs and the ramps from the jetty to the boat are not too steep. There is also a toilet on board, but that is not wheelchair accessible. Whilst we're on the cruise on a relatively calm day, the Southern Ocean can be quite choppy. So if you are somebody that gets motion sickness, it may be worth taking any medications you rely on prior to departure. As we get closer to Cape Raoul, we started seeing colonies of New Zealand fur seals. Now these are not the same species as Neil the seal. Honestly, I think if Neil saw one, he'd probably scream at it before squashing it, as they're considerably smaller than what Neil is, an elephant seal. Fur seals were heavily hunted in the waters around Tasmania in the 1800s to a point that they almost went extinct. As seal hunting went out of vogue, the population slowly started to regenerate, but due to the commercial fishing industry are still listed as vulnerable in Australia. Cape Raoul is part of the Tasman National Park, which encompasses both Forster and Tasman peninsulas, as well as Tasman Island. The cape was named after Joseph Raoul, a sailor who was part of the De Castro expedition of Southern Van Diemen's Land in 1793. The waters around the national park were popular for whaling in the mid-1800s until overfishing decimated the population. In the late 1800s, the British Royal Navy used the dolerite columns of Cape Raoul as target practice every summer they came for the Hobart Regatta, much to the disdain of the public. It's now time to head back to Port Arthur. We don't tend to have a lot of luck on these cruises with seeing animals other than seals, so maybe we get to see something this time. We were partway back and somebody spotted a dolphin, which turned into a couple of dolphins, which then turned into a whole pod of dolphins. So there was about 50 to 100 there. No one could obviously get a good count on them, but it was so beautiful to see and they're so majestic in the water. At the start of this video, I asked if the cruise was worth it, and I firmly believe it is. The boat is comfortable and is easy to make your way around. The crew are incredibly friendly and knowledgeable about the area, and it was amazing to see parts of the Tasman Peninsula you are unable to see unless you are hiking to Cape Raoul or have a boat. Seeing the fur seals and dolphins were an added bonus to the adventure. I definitely recommend making sure your camera and phones are charged. Once we got back to Port Arthur Historic Site, you definitely have enough time to wander around and see things. We've been to Port Arthur a few times, so I'll leave a link to our video walking around the historic site in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. One of the perks of living in Tasmania is being able to go and do tourist things when it's a little bit more quieter, so we've been on quite a lot of cruises around Tasmania. I'll leave a link to the playlist right here, and I hope it gives some inspiration on your next Tasmania adventures, and I'll see you in the next one.